We did create $1 million business support fund to help local businesses. It's $1 million doesn't go as far as you would hope, but we put aside 50% of the money for women and minority-owned businesses because they did worse with those PPP loans than everybody else, and so we wanted to make sure here in Santa Cruz that the resources we had got to those in need and may not have gotten other help from the feds.
Hi, welcome to Zoom Around Town. Today we have special guest, John Leopold.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So John is such a special guest because he's an incumbent and he is running again for district supervisor of district number 1. So how many times have you been supervisor? How many terms have you served?
I'm in my 3rd term right now. I've served 12 years on the board.
Nice. What inspired you to do public service like this?
Well, I came from a family that says to be part of a community, you must give service to the community. And I saw that with my parents growing up and the way they were involved with the library board or our temple or our schools. And so that's always been a part of who I am. And when I came to Santa Cruz 35 years ago, that's what I saw as I immediately tried to get involved with the community because I wanted to be part of the community. And through that, I served on school boards, of the Cabrillo board. I was involved with nonprofits. I ran the Santa Cruz AIDS Project. And a couple years before I decided to run, people started coming to me, recognizing that the incumbent at that time was probably not going to run again, and asked me to run. And I'd always been involved with political campaigns. I never thought of myself as a candidate. But at that time, I was on the Cabrillo College Board, which is an elected position. And so people started thinking about me. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought I had something to offer.
Well, obviously you do. You've done a lot. So that's exciting. And so 12 years. So tell us, in the 12 years that you have been on the Board of Supervisors, what have you done?
Well, there's a lot of things. There's a couple things that I'm most proud of. One is when I first came into office, the first thing I did is I held a series of community meetings where 500 people came out to sort of say how they'd like us to spend the money. And from there, we built the Boys and Girls Club in Live Oak. We did the East Cliff Parkway. We got the Heart of Soquel Park built for the first time after it being talked about for decades. We were able to secure funding to get the first medical office in Live Oak.
Wow.
Live Oak, if it was a city, would be the 3rd largest city, bigger than Capitola and Scotts Valley combined, but didn't have one doctor's office.
Wow.
So those are just a couple of the things. There's a lot more that I've worked on policy-wise. I wrote the first vacation rental policy that limited vacation rentals in our neighborhoods. I've written policy around alcohol nuisance abatement. I've just completed a major work on sea level rise. So there's a lot of pieces that I'm very proud of.
I would be. I mean, as a local, I've been here my whole life. And with the fires, the amount of rental property available it's like practically non-existent. I couldn't even imagine what it would be like if we had students here. So that's great that you already, a long time ago, you put into like limitations. I mean, I understand that some people might not be happy about that, but for the locals, I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, well, it was hugely controversial 10 years ago when I did it. They took ads against me on the radio that people would show up and tell me how I was ruining their property rights. And it's been fascinating to watch. At the time, we were just trying to keep residential neighborhoods residential, not just hotels. And over the 10 years, it's really shifted. The community sentiment is to have more limitations, not less, which wasn't the case back in 2010, 2011. So that's been helpful. And then we have a board that's really committed to that. And so just this past spring, we actually voted to reduce the number of vacation rentals that are here for the first time. So I think that's when we first did it, we limited the number. They couldn't grow anymore. But now we're actually going to be reducing the number of vacation rentals. So
that's for Santa Cruz County or just your district?
It's for all the unincorporated area. I think there's something like 600 vacation rental permits in the unincorporated area, and I have 350 in my district, and then there's something like 300 plus in the Seacliff neighborhood. That's where most of them are, because that's, when you look at Airbnb or VRBO, people want to be close to the ocean.
Mhm.
And so that's where you see the majority of them. So although it's for the entire unincorporated area, the impact is greatest in the coastal neighborhoods.
So how are you going to decide who gets to keep their permit?
Well, when we first did this, we grandfathered everyone in,
I
and
see.
then we put a limit on them that they had to renew them every 5 years, and if they didn't show rental activity, then they lost their permit. We limited the number per block to no more than 20%, and now we reduced the number by 15%, which means that as permits come due, they won't be able to renew until we get down to the number that we'd like.
I have a property in Bonnie Doon, and so 2 years ago when we bought the property, we got an Airbnb permit for a couple rooms in our house so that we could afford our mortgage because the mortgage
Sure.
cost is so high. So will that affect somebody like me, or is it just for vacation rentals that are homes independent?
Well, it's interesting you ask because when we first did the vacation rentals, it was really just for homes because the problem as we were trying to address was quality of life in neighborhoods that, party houses are a big problem. They were less of a problem with hosted rentals, with people who just have a room in their house, because you're not going to let an out of control party go on every weekend at your house if you're going to live there. Maybe 2 years ago, my colleagues thought that we should have more regulations for the hosted rentals, and they said that we should have a cap. So we have a cap now of 250 permits just for hosted rentals, which are basically rooms. And that was done in the first year. You couldn't get a permit for that now.
Right. Yeah. No, I was, I think, 220.
Under the wire.
Right in. Wow, it just sounds like you're such an accomplished supervisor. It's amazing. How do you like being on the board? And do you agree always with the people that are on the board? I think, what is there, 5 supervisors or is there 6?
Yeah, no, there's 5 supervisors. California Constitution says that each county has to have 5 supervisors. And I would say that our board right now actually works pretty well. 5 people shouldn't agree on everything, right?
Mhm.
I've been with my wife for 30 plus years. We don't agree on anything. It's not that you agree on everything. It's how you communicate and dialogue, and it's just incredibly respectful. So, there are sometimes on some issues I'm with this group of supervisors. Sometimes I'm with a different group of supervisors, and a lot of the times we're unanimous in what we do. And I think that that's a healthy political dialogue. It's something we so don't see at the national level right now, where people just won't get along and they just go to their corners and they just say, I'm just going to try to find the competitive advantage to beat him or to win on this issue. And so, when it comes to disasters or it comes to vacation rental permits or just good policy, we're generally rowing in the same direction. Some of us might like a little bit more, or some of us might like a little bit less. But it's incredibly respectful dialogue. So I really enjoy the people I get to work with right now.
Awesome. So a couple elephants here we're trying to handle in 2020. One big one is COVID. So
Sure.
how has that affected commerce in your district and in the county and the revenue in the county? And how is the county able to support us when people are on forbearance and maybe they're not paying their property taxes, and the schools are now not being open? So how is this affecting the county resources, and what can be done about it? What have you seen?
Yeah, well, it was very clear to me early on about the impact that it would have on the community. When you close down everything, that is obviously going to be as severe as you could possibly have in terms of government action. And so at the very first board meeting, after we ordered after there was the shutdown order, I wrote the eviction moratorium to prevent people and businesses from losing their property because they couldn't pay. We didn't know at that time whether this was going to be a 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 months, 2 years problem, but I knew that what I saw during the Great Recession, where we saw 150 homes go into foreclosure every month for 5 years, that we needed to act quickly to be able to protect people in their homes. And so the state took action, and we put ours back in place. And this Tuesday, the state has passed legislation to protect residential properties, but we're going to have action this Tuesday. Supervisor Coonerty and I are bringing and another piece about an eviction moratorium for commercial properties, because we don't want to lose our local businesses. They are incredibly resilient. That's what I've seen in my district, is the local businesses are doing everything they can to hang on. I made sure when we started opening back up that we changed our rules so businesses could legally operate outside, that they could move their tables into their parking lots to be able to make it. Because after this is all over, those local businesses are part of the heart and soul of who we are as a community. And so you had to move quickly. And so I've talked with a lot of the business owners, and they were able to take advantage of it, which I was very grateful for. And I think the community is grateful for, and they've been showing their support for them. But in terms of the county revenues, there are three main ways that we pay for county government: property tax, sales tax, and transient occupancy tax, or the hotel tax, called TOT.
Which are all being dramatically impacted right now. We're people buying things. People aren't staying.
Yeah, well, it's so fortunately when COVID hit, about 70% of the property tax was already in for the year. So we haven't seen a big hit there. Sales tax has gone down, but it's surprisingly that it's only gone down a couple of percentage points. We in April we were thinking, a double-digit decrease. Transient occupancy tax, obviously, it just went away during the months of April and May, but by June the state had allowed them to operate again. Mm-hmm. And it's been a relatively good summer in terms of visitors coming here or other people staying in hotels, motels, and vacation rentals. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of different reasons for that, but it's been, I think, a generally good summer for that industry. And so in May, we thought that we were going to have a $40 million deficit in our fiscal year that started July 1st. Uh-huh. We did our second round of budget hearings. That number had come down to about 26 million. Oh, wow. Which is, it only looks good in comparison.
Right.
And we got some money from the feds. Our employees agreed to furloughs, and we had to make $12 million worth of cuts to the county budget. We tried to keep it away from services, keep it on administrative pieces, but 24 people lost their jobs.
Yeah, that's tough. That's really tough. I mean, as a small business owner, we got a PPP loan we were one of the first people to get it. Unfortunately, no one in the county could offer it to us because all the resources were gone. So I was able to get a loan actually from a bank in Minnesota. And then I was able to help hundreds of local businesses who didn't get funding in this county to get it in Minnesota. But it did help for the first 8 weeks. But now, we're still, whether businesses are open or not, sure, restaurants can be, having people outside and we can do social distancing in our facility, but people are still afraid of coming in. So it's awesome what you guys have done. And the populace that's actually wanting to do the services is a lot smaller.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. We did create $1 million business support fund to help local businesses. It's $1 million doesn't go as far as you would hope, but we put aside 50% of the money for women and minority-owned businesses because they did worse with those PPP loans than everybody else, and so we wanted to make sure here in Santa Cruz that the resources we had got to those in need and may not have gotten other help from the feds.
Yeah, so that's a $15,000 grant, which is amazing, and one of the requirements is you could have not received federal funding.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, it becomes, there are lots of different ways. Some people have been able to access it, some haven't. We're trying to help everybody survive. And it would be great if there was a sense of urgency in Washington among both parties that could say, we're still suffering this disaster. And this disaster needs resources, and it's historic low interest rates. This is a good time for the government to be printing money to helping people out, and to just think that they've given out trillions of dollars, true, but the need is so much greater, and the impact is real. It's real for people keeping their business. for local government, which are huge employers in many places.
Yeah, I mean, I roll my eyes because I just wish that those people sitting on, Capitol Hill were in the trenches like you and I, where we're seeing firsthand what's going on. And I walked downtown today and so many businesses have nobody, they're open and they have nobody in them. And it's,
Sure.
this is when school would have just gotten in session. And I understand also that some people aren't stoked on UCSC being here at all, but like, it's a huge revenue generator for the county.
Yeah.
And it's so helpful. And the restaurants are closed, and it's just, to me, tragic. And it's really unfortunate that we're still waiting to have, big government do something.
Well, I mean, listen, it's our money.
Right.
They should be using our money to help us out, right? That it's great that they want to help out the airlines, and it's great that the cruise ships they employ lots of people, but we've been paying lots of taxes. Now's the time where we all need help. Main Street needs help. And let's worry a little bit less about the stock market and worry a lot more about what's happening in communities like ours. And our local legislators, let me just give a shout out to Congressman Jimmy Panetta and Anna Eshoo. They've been there. They have met with local businesses. They have talked with local government. They're pushing in Washington. The House of Representatives passed a bill in May, in the middle of May, the HEROES Act. That
Yep.
if they had done that, if they had passed that, not only would you have $1,000 more each month to help you through this difficult time, but the county would have got enough money. We would have had to make 0 cuts.
Wow.
And everybody would have kept their job. So it's there is a group that's actually doing something about it, and there's a group that is just choosing not to help people out as if they don't know what's going to happen. It's willful ignorance.
Yes, I agree. For those of you just tuning in, this is Jaimi Jansen with Zoom Around Town with Jaimi, and our special guest today is Supervisor for District 1, John Leopold. We are going to have a quick break, and we will talk to him about how to get your vote on and what he's done to create an amazing new park in Live Oak. So join us when we return. Welcome back. I'm Jaimi with Zoom Around Town with Jaimi, and this is District Supervisor number 1, John Leopold, and we are so thrilled to have you back. Before we get into our next kind of segment of conversation, how do we get in touch with you? How do we follow you? How do we see what you're up to?
Yeah, well, there's lots of different ways. I have a website that I put issues on and talk about a lot of different pieces, and it's www.friendsofjohnleopold.com. So you can go and pretend you're a friend of John Leopold. I'm also on Facebook. I have a Supervisor John Leopold Facebook page. And I also have an Instagram account where at both Instagram and Facebook, I try to put local issues, tell people what's coming up. And the Instagram account is at Super Leopold. So just imagine me in a cape.
It's a great slogan. It's great. So I went to an opening of a park on Chanticleer. You want to tell us about that park?
Yeah, this is an amazing story, and it's really incredible just how the community came together. Several years back, the county had a redevelopment agency, and for 25 years, that agency used tax funds, and instead of being sent to Sacramento, could be used here. And they purchased 4 acres of land. They purchased a number of parcels to assemble a park. And when I first became supervisor, we started doing the community planning. And then the legislature decided to eliminate redevelopment. They didn't replace it with something else. We were just left without resources. And so the park, a bunch of neighbors from the community formed a group called Chanticleer Park Neighbors. And they said, we're going to take care of the park. And they planned activities and they did festivals there. And I considered it the county's largest DIY park. And several years back, maybe 4 years back, one of the women who led Chanticleer Park Neighbors, this incredible woman, Mariah Roberts, came to me with another incredible woman, Trisha Potts. Trisha lived in Aptos, but she has 3 kids, all have some kind of disability. And she had been to this park in Salinas called Tatum's Garden that was a park that was accessible for all kids. She had a son who was in a wheelchair, and he couldn't play with his sisters because there so many parks do not allow wheeled vehicles on there. And so as she went to Tatum Park, and her family could all play together, and her son could play with other kids. And it was a life-changing experience. And she said, we have to have that here in Santa Cruz. And so they identified Chanticleer Park. And they said, what will it take? And I said, well, it takes $4 million to build the park. And they said, well, what if we came up with half? And we said, we'll come up with the other half. We didn't know exactly where we'd get it from, but we said, if you come up with 2, we'll come up with 2. Well, these 2 women who have no experience in fundraising, just were creative powerhouses and just incredible spokespeople, went around and got the Rotaries involved and the Seroptimist, and they helped bake sales, and they went to foundations. And in less than 2 years, they raised $2 million.
Less than 2 years. Wow.
And I watched the whole thing, and I've done fundraising in the past, and so I know what it's like. And the county found another $2 million. And fortunately, we were able to open that park in January. And it was an amazing event. We had 500 people there. We had this incredible speaker because the park has a place called Leo's Haven, which is really geared toward children of all abilities. And they have a whole set of programming so kids know how to interact with kids of different abilities and disabilities. And so we had this incredible speaker that was deaf and blind, and she gave a great talk, and I interviewed her on stage, and all the service groups were there, and it was packed every day until COVID, when we closed everything down. And we just opened up the playgrounds last weekend, and I was just by Chanticleer Park today, and it's, again, filled with kids. So they're wearing masks now. There's a lot of hand sanitizer around, but it's great to see kids out and about again.
Yeah, and that park, it's a beautiful park. It's not just for kids. It has dog park, a little dog park. It's just awesome. We went to the opening, and I have a niece and a dog, and it was awesome. It's such a great place.
Yeah, we just started another round of planning for phase 2, because we're talking about adding a tennis court in the back, a little skateboard feature, some other amenities, some more community gardens there, because it's really it's immediately became a well-loved park, and it's more than just a neighborhood park. It really meets the needs of so many people in the community. So just watching that happen, being able to support these incredible women, to see the community come together, because that park, it's really, everybody has a piece of that park. Because if you bought that cookie, if you go to your Rotary, if you got involved with a bicycle ride that they do, everybody has a little piece of it. And then we paid for it through a sales tax measure. Part of it was a sales tax measure. So everybody has a piece of that park, which it really makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I live in Bonnie Doon. My sister lives on the west side, and we go to that park, and it's an excursion to go to it. It's not just like, oh, we're going to stop by. It's like, hey, you want to go to that park? Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Well, I was just there are 2 dog parks there, one for big dogs, one for little dogs. You usually don't have that. And as I talked to the dog owners, they said, yeah, it works out really well. And every once in a while, there's a dog that doesn't play well with others in one, but will play well with others in the other. And so it really, there's a whole community of dog folks who are get together every morning or every afternoon, whenever is convenient for them and their dogs. And to me, parks build community. And when I see that happening, when I see those groupings together, that's part of the reason I'm in office, is to build community.
No, that's awesome, and way to go.
Yeah.
So elections are right around the corner, and I've been displaced, so I'm not even sure how to get a ballot because it hasn't come in the mail. What do we do? I think it's so important to vote and exercise our rights. What do you suggest?
Well, this is going to be a different election for lots of different reasons. In March, the last election, 70% of the voters voted by mail. So there's a lot of people who are used to voting by mail. I myself am a permanent absentee. I always get my ballot in the mail. And so, but this time, everybody's going to get their ballot in the mail. And they're going to go out at the end of this week, actually. If you live in a house that either doesn't exist anymore or that you don't receive mail there anymore, you should go to the county's website, votecount.us, and there's instructions there about how you can tell the election staff where you are or where you'd like to get your ballot. And so we're not also going to have polling places this time in the traditional sense. We've all grown up and gotten used to going to the firehouse or the church or the high school. We're not doing that this time. We were on that path anyway, and we've accelerated for this election. And so when you get the ballots, you can send them right back. It doesn't cost anything. We pay the postage. There will also be drop boxes at a number of locations all around the community, down at the county building, at the Simpkins Swim Center, in the city of Santa Cruz, and every city will also have them. The whole list of there is also on the website. And then we're also going to have, in the final week of the election, we're actually going to have polling places. We're going to have something like 7 or 8 polling places where you can go and vote if that's the way you choose to do it.
So is this just for the county? Is every county doing it differently? And it'll be, so 2 parts. One is every county doing it differently? And then the second part is mobilizing the electorate is pretty amazing and can cause some profound changes in the results. So what do you predict? So those are 2 questions.
Yeah, well, so all of California is going for mail-in ballots. And, just so you know, states have been doing this for a while. Oregon did it years ago. Utah does it. I think there's one other state that also is all mail ballots.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So this is not something new. It's been tried before. Despite what the president says, it's a very safe way to vote. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people who are used to it here in Santa Cruz.
Right.
So a large number of people vote by mail. So it's really working on that, 30%, 35% who are used to going to a polling place who now won't be able to go to it. How do we move those folks to make sure that they vote, because it's going to be new to them. Mm-hmm. And they could be older, they could have disabilities, there could be lots of issues. And then when you put on top of it COVID, maybe they like going to a polling place, but now they can't do that because they're at high risk. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of groups that'll help that, but on that final election week, there'll be a number to call. It's also on the county website that people will be able to call in, and the county clerk of elections has arranged people to give rides to come down, and so you can, if you can't make it yourself, somebody will come and pick you up and take you to vote. So it's going to be important that, I think that in a presidential year, you usually get a lot more voters than you do in a non-presidential year. So I think there's going to be a lot of things pushing people to the polls. You just can't open the paper any day or turn on the internet or the TV and not know that there's a presidential election going on.
Right.
And so we're this very polarized nation. And so I think there'll be a lot of people pushing folks to the polls at a local level, at a state level, at a national level. And so there are ways you can do it here in Santa Cruz.
So how do you think that will adjust or change the outlook on who wins? Do you think that, because and do you know that California or Oregon and Utah did going to vote by mail only really make a huge change for them, or do you not?
They saw increased participation when people could vote by mail, because there's going to be, I don't know, I think there's a dozen initiatives on the ballot, and increasingly people like to be at home, look at their ballot and say, what should I do with Prop 15? Prop 16, who supports that? What's going on with Prop 17? And so they get out all their favorite resources and fill out their ballot at home where they feel most comfortable. And so I think you'll see with this all-mail ballot that participation will go up, not go down.
Oh, I agree.
And that I think one of the big changes that we have the potential to see is that in close races, we may not know on election night who won. Mm-hmm. And it may be in some ways be weeks before we do know, because California law has been changed to allow ballots that were postmarked before the election or election day be still counted, even if they arrive 17 days after the election.
Do you
So,
think that by having mail-in ballots, it will, like, maybe it's like some counties predominantly Republican or predominantly Democrat. Do you think that by having more of a populist vote that could change?
well, I think things don't change rapidly. They change incrementally. But if you look at the November 2018 elections, a lot of counties in Southern California, which had been historic Republican strongholds, Orange County, elected Democrats to Congress. And so there's the national dialogue is definitely influencing what happens in local communities. And so you see places that have been historically Republican, which are, becoming really a minority party. I mean, I think the registrations in the state is less than a third of all voters.
Oh, wow.
So, and the fastest growing is no party preference. So people are, that's, Democrats aren't out of the woods on that as well. I don't think you'll see a radical shift, but you just start seeing these trends, right? Where they say red goes to purple, purple might go to blue, right?
Right. Yeah.
And maybe there's places where it's happening the other way, but those are, if it is, it's happening in far less places here in California.
Well, I look forward to having a more mobilized electorate, and hopefully our voices will be heard more if there's more people voting. I'm not sure. I'm hoping. So let's circle back around to something that's really relevant in my world right now, and not 100% relevant in your district, but being in that you're a supervisor, you've handled the fires, the decisions about the fires, the permitting process. For those who aren't like having the fire in their backyard, they may have forgotten or just like, oh, it's happened and it's done. It's very much not over. And now we're just barely getting into the hazmat cleanup. So tell us what's going on.
Well, when this fire started, it was unclear to me whether it was going to be in my district or not. The Highway 17 is the dividing line, and everything basically up to Highway 17 was evacuated. And so we had a lot of nervous days. But one of the things that I try to use is my experience and my relationships. And so 3 days into the fire, I had got on the phone with colleagues that I know in Sonoma County, in Butte County, who had gone through big fires to find out what it is they had done to help their community, not during the firefighting motion, but after the fire. How do we start thinking about rebuilding? What worked? What didn't work? What do they wish they had done? And try to learn from their experiences, because this is unfortunately a part of life here in California right now. Yeah. So they gave me great information, and then when it was clear that the fire was not going to be in the first district, I made sure to connect them with my colleagues, Supervisor Coonerty and McPherson, so they could learn. And we've started changing a lot of our processes and learning from those communities, especially Sonoma County. And so, what we found in Sonoma County was you got to let people live on their properties while they work to rebuild. And if they can't live on their property, you got to let them live on some other property and change the rules, make it flexible.
Right.
So we did that. They brought in extra consultants, so permits could be processed in days rather than weeks or months. We've done that. We have learned that if people come back with houses 10%, no more than 10% bigger than what they had before, we're going to approve that. That's going to be an easy approval. At my suggestion, we're hiring a drilling firm to start doing the borings in neighborhoods, because we know that's a scarce resource. Mm-hmm. Finding someone who can do it. The geotechnical guys are a little bit more available, but if you can get the borings, someone can look at it and be able to turn that around real quick. So that's a way that we can help people. And some of us on the board have been working towards revising the planning department to really get the planning and public works department to act like they're one unit instead of two silos. Because when we did an analysis about how many times people touch a permit, it was like 97 touches, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and it becomes very expensive. So some of us have been pushing for a community development department that would combine those two pieces. I think you're going to see part of that happen in our fire response, and it's going to lead within the next year to the development of a community development department that will merge those two pieces together. It's far past time to be able to do that.
So I have a question about the assessor part of it. I went and filled out an assessor application because I mean, my house has been devalued. I can't live in my house for a year. And then on our group Facebook pages, they're saying that the most that they'll drop I understand the county works with property tax, but the most that will be dropped on someone's property is 1/3, even with no building standing. And then it makes me wonder if my property taxes will be adjusted, given that I still have a home standing.
Well, the assessor recorder is actually an elected position. We elect right now, it's a man named Sean Saldavia. He's got an office on the first floor of the county building. They have a great website. They have information there, and people should contact that office to talk to the staff there about how they're going to be doing assessments and reassessments.
Awesome. And you were mentioning that the permitting process, the permit gets touched 97 times. So how is it going to change for the people who, like, I had a structure that when I purchased the house wasn't necessarily a legal structure, and so now I want to rebuild it and make it a legal structure. So I'm basically starting from scratch. So how am I going to have to wait 6 months to 12 months to even start the rebuild process? How's that going to work?
Well, I think that one of the things we've talked about is grandfathering what was there, because there are some places where we know that there are things that were built that were unpermitted.
Mm-hmm.
But had been part of the property, and so the idea is trying to show that it had been there. If the structure, one of the things we're concerned about is the heat of the fire really changed foundations, and so you may have to pour a new foundation,
Mm-hmm.
and to do that, you're going to require some geotech work, because this isn't like a urban community. Where
Right.
everything's the same. There's just a lot of
Yeah.
variations up there. And so the idea is to move it through quickly, because if you had the building before, you should be able to have it again if it wasn't creating a health and safety violation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I think we're working towards.
Awesome. Well, voting day then is going to be any day that you get your ballot, you can send it in.
Yeah, I think people will start getting some people will start getting their ballots next week, and they'll start voting next week. And we don't no longer have a voting day; we have a voting month. And it's been that way for a while. So those of us in electoral politics have been very aware that some people vote early, and where historically a lot of things would happen at that last week of the election. Now they start happening at the beginning of October, just because that's the ways some people choose to vote. And so it's 33 days to the election, but it's really, probably less than 25 till people start actually voting. And so that I've been out walking, knocking on doors, talking to voters. I'll be sending out mail. There's been lots of stuff on a social media campaign. Those are all the aspects of a modern campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite robust, the amount of effort it takes to educate people, and then now hopefully it's just easier for them to actually vote. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, we've tried to make it very easy. Gail Pellerin, who's our county clerk of election, is super committed to making it very easy for people to vote. She wants people to vote. And unlike some places where they set up hurdles for people to vote for political reasons, she's the exact opposite. She tries to keep the lowest bar possible to get you in to vote.
That's awesome. That's how it should be.
That's exactly right. We live in this wonderful democracy, and it's the way in which you realize the vision of America that the founders had is by active participation of the electorate and choosing their representatives in a representative democracy. And when I hear the president say how unsafe he thinks ballots are, I think, you're president, you could actually make it safer. If you really believe that, why don't you put some resources? Why don't you put some ways to help remove those hurdles instead of figuring out new ways to place new hurdles in there? It's clear that there are folks who don't want people to vote, because the demographics that aren't on their side. But here in California, we're the exact opposite. And Our Secretary of State is very interested in making sure that we vote. Our county clerk of election is very interested we vote. Our local electeds are interested to make sure people get a chance to vote.
That's awesome.
Santa Cruz was one of the first counties in the state that said, we're going to pay the postage for the absentee ballots. It used to be you had to think about how many stamps you had to put on it. But we said, no, we should pay for that. And we led the state, and then they passed legislation so every county has that.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Again, this is Supervisor John Leopold of District Number 1, and he is up for re-election. So get your voting on, get started, and you can follow him at Super Leopold on Instagram and friendsofjohnleopold.com. So thanks again, and stay tuned for the next Zoom Around Town with Jaimi.